India, the world's third largest aviation market and one of the fastest growing ones, has one of the greatest histories in terms of aviation. The history of Indian aviation is closely tied with that of Air India and state control, with its roots in the 1930s. So, how did India become the aviation hub it is today? Let's find out. The first flight. On 18 February 1911, an airmail flight took off from Allahabad, heading to Naini over a distance of 6 miles, which is almost 10 kilometers. It lasted for around 13 minutes. A 23-year-old Frenchman named Henri Peckett carried 6,500 pieces of mail on a humbler biplane. For the next 2 decades, such flights became very common. And during this period of time, some very important events happened, which laid the foundation for aviation in India. Early aviation in India. During 1924, airports were built at Allahabad, Bombay and Calcutta. In 1927, under the British rule, the government set up the Indian Civil Aviation Department, and on 1929 Imperial Airways, currently British Airways, flew from London to Karachi, making it the first international flight of India. It had to make 20 different stops for refueling, and the flight was 6 days long. You might think that it is very long, but at that time it would take 3 to 4 weeks via ship to reach Karachi from England. Also, in 1929, Aero Club of India and Burma started, which was the first flying school of India, and they handed the first Indian commercial pilot license to J.R.D. Tata, who is the pioneer of Indian aviation. The beginning. Indian aviation kicked off in 1932, with the introduction of the first airline, Tata Air Services. The airline, founded by J.R.D. Tata, started as an airmail carrier within India, after winning a contract with Imperial Airways. The airline flew its inaugural flight in October 1932, flying from Karachi to Mumbai. The airline progressed from a small freight airline to a commercial passenger airline. By 1938, the airline was renamed to Tata Airlines and was flying domestic flights to a number of destinations. J.R.D. Tata was himself heavily involved in the airline. He flew the airline's inaugural flight in 1932. Tata Airways also played a role in the Second World War, carrying troops and supplies for Britain during the war. The foundation of Air India. In 1947, following Indian independence, Tata Airways was renamed Air India, and the government took a 49% stake in the airline. The airline began flying its first international flights in the next year, flying from Mumbai to London on a Lockheed Constellation. It was a weekly service. And this route had a special name, the Malabar Princess. It was 24 hours long and had to stop 2 times for refueling. By the 1950s, India was home to a number of smaller airlines, operating in the different parts of the country. Some notable airlines were Deccan Airways based in Hyderabad and Kalinga Airlines based in Kolkata. Air India remained the national carrier, flying multiple domestic and international routes. In 1953, the Indian government nationalized the aviation industry, taking control of all major airlines. This resulted in the 8 major airlines being merged into 2 airlines run by the government. These 2 airlines were Air India and Indian Airlines. Government-run airlines. The 2 government airlines were simplified for efficiency. Indian Airlines focused on domestic routes in India, and Air India focused on international routes. This led to a significant streamlining of operations, allowing the government to manage these airlines. Air India International, the new airline, was India's flag carrier and quickly became a major international carrier. Air India became known for its superior service and profitable business model, led by J.R.D. Tata, who stayed on as chairman of the airline post-privatization. The airline also became of the first few to purchase the 747, hoping to keep its status as a premier airline. Mind that Air India, back then, was one of the best airlines and was in a far better shape than it is now. In the 1970s, due to war and domestic disputes, both the airlines were in huge struggle. In the 1990s, the peak of India's financial crisis, India reversed its stance on regulation and allowed private airlines once again. The birth of modern Indian aviation. By 1994, India repealed all laws regulating the formation of airlines and allowed the introduction of scheduled private airlines. This deregulation allowed for the formation of new airlines such as Jet Airways and Modiluft. This laid the groundwork for the current Indian aviation industry. Following the 1994 reforms, India saw a number of airlines crop up. Air India and Indian Airlines continued to operate as government-run airlines. However, carriers such as Jet Airways and Air Sahara began chipping away at the legacy airlines, trying to establish themselves. Foreign players were attracted by the Deregulation Act. Lufthansa invested in Modi Luft, but it failed to succeed. Later it was bought by Ajay Singh and was renamed as SpiceJet. The aviation boom. In India, most of the people do not care on how the services are and what all perks will be available on the flight. They will always prefer the cheapest ticket. The 2000s marked the beginning of India's aviation boom. Full-service carriers such as Air India and Jet Airways were challenged by a slew of low-cost airlines. Low-cost airlines drastically reduced fares, allowing millions more to fly and challenging the larger airlines. Notable examples of low-cost airlines were Indigo, SpiceJet, Go Air, and Air Asia India. These airlines now occupy over 70% of the domestic market and continue growing. This explosion of airlines and low fares has propelled India into the third-largest aviation market, requiring thousands of new aircraft in the coming decades. This growth has also attracted some foreign airlines such as Emirates and Qatar Airways. Now they are also flying to nearly a dozen cities and hold a significant share in the market. So guys, how do you think the history of Indian aviation was? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you liked the video, make sure to subscribe and share this video with all your friends interested in aviation. Well then, see you guys in the next video. Until then, goodbye.